As the Chinese economy has grown, so has its pollution rate. And with the eyes of the world watching China just to see how it's going to lower its carbon emissions, the Chinese government, as well as the wind power industry, have made giant strides at dealing with lowering its emissions. On today's show, we're going to find out just how China's become a leader in wind power and speak to experts in the field to find out how this technology works and truly how they're dealing with the future and what are the challenges facing this green, clean energy. The world is racing to decrease global warming and lower CO2 emissions. China's at the forefront of trying to gradually lower its reliance on coal and develop alternative energy resources like wind. China relies on coal for approximately 80% of its energy. The government expects to increase non-fossil-based energy sources to 15% of total energy consumption by 2020, with wind power playing a major role. At present, fossil-based energy sources supply the majority of the country's total energy consumption. China is the leading global consumer of coal. As the country rapidly pushes towards development, it has reached a shocking production level of coal, as well as consumption levels of coal-derived electricity.
5 years ago, 2004, we started doing analysis on global markets for what we felt were the next emerging markets for wind energy as a sector, and clearly India and China were both growing sectors. China more particularly because in 2006 they initiated the renewable energy law, and they were a little ahead of what India was going to do. So in 2005 we made investments here in wind energy in Inner Mongolia.
Talk to me about this map. Tell me about it.
Gerald Page is the managing director of Equinox Energy Partners, based out of Beijing. He is dedicated to advancing the interests of alternative energy and clean tech companies, as well as establishing global support for the greening of China through his direct involvement in NGOs and the Equinox network of government and institutional contacts. Mr. Page is a regular guest speaker at global energy conferences.
Some of these projects, like Norfolk here, is 5,000 megawatt project. In the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a substantial amount of money invested into the sector. I think a lot more than the rest of the world recognizes or is reported in the rest of the world in the greening of China. Many programs to stimulate green growth. In fact, the stimulus package that was announced a year and a half ago, $586 billion, $221 billion, or 35% of that is dedicated to the green sector.
It gave the Chinese state-owned commercial banks a clear signal that additional investment, accelerated investment in infrastructure was a desirable thing to do over 2009 and 2010.
So a lot of that money has flowed down into various provinces to stimulate great programs in building sustainability and green and clean tech programs for the greening of China. So I think it's fantastic here, real opportunity.
As an example of China's drive to create green technology development, it is setting up economic development zones like that of the city of Baoding, which is located in Hebei province. It is a pilot city for renewable energy situated just 100 kilometers away from the capital city of Beijing. Currently, the 3 economic pillars for Baoding are the solar PV industry, wind power, and energy efficiency industries. This focus has given the city's new energy economy a strong push in infrastructure development for building a low-carbon future.
开发区的经济支柱主要以新能源和智能电网产品为主的这些生产企业，这些骨干企业都在国内、国际占有举足轻重的地位。我们光伏行业的产品的产量占世界产量的10%以上，我们中航汇腾的叶片占国内市场份额的40%以上，所以说我们这些企业都有一定的产业和技术的优势。
Simply stated, utilizing wind to turn the blades of a turbine which generates electricity produces no harmful emissions in the process, unlike coal, which releases high levels of carbon into the atmosphere. Chinese enterprises have mastered advanced off-grid wind turbine generation technology through technology transfer from foreign companies. There are two kinds of utilization which must be addressed in any discussion of wind-powered developments: off-grid and in-grid. Off-grid utilization is primarily as an independent power operation system, often in remote regions. The power generation capacity of a single off-grid generator ranges from 100 watts to 10 kilowatts. In-grid power is integrated within conventional power grids, providing the most economical and large-scale utilization of wind power.
我们现在有60平方公里，远期有130平方公里的发展空间，作为我们新能源企业入驻的基本条件。另外，保定呢还有优良的人力资源。保定有大学13所，其中最著名的、适合于新能源发展的华北电力大学。这个学校就建有中国唯一的新能源可再生能源学院，他们专为新能源培养相关的人才并且我们保定呢原来有一定的工业基础，有好多成熟的掌握技术的一些蓝领的工人。
We're in this huge facility creating wind turbine energy power. It is incredible to watch how big these engines are, and there's line after line after line of all of these incredible engines. It is really remarkable. I can't imagine how heavy it must be and what you must do to have to create this and build a whole field of wind power. Gojin is the largest supplier of wind energy in all of China. In 2009, China overtook the United States in renewable energy investments for the first time ever. China put $34.6 billion into renewable energy projects, mostly wind farms. Wind energy and solar power are the most popular renewables, nabbing billions of dollars of investment. These numbers have also been translated into millions of new jobs in green technology. We're here at Gojin United Power, a major wind technology supplier for all of China. Everything you're seeing manufactured here is for supply and for wind energy in northern China. These turbines are amazingly huge. This is the first subsidiary of Gojin who have trained everyone else in wind technology. Impressive. It has been recently announced that China's National Energy Administration has developed a new energy plan for 2011 to 2020, which will invest 5 trillion RMB in a range of renewable and low-carbon energy sources, including wind technologies.
在一个地方建厂，主要考虑几个方面的条件。第一个是当地的投资环境，这里面包括一个用工环境，还有当地的基础设施以及配套的产业。第二一个是当地政府的支持，比如在税收、土地方面的支持。第三个是我们的考虑到风机的一个运输成本。那么为什么我们选择在保定呢？那么保定首先在保定在用地上给予了这个公司的一个大力支持，另外在税收等方面创造一个良好的环境。同时保定这个基地距离中国的很多的风场的距离很近，能够节约一些运输成本。
Massive investment in wind energy has occurred, but as important is the creation of regulations and standards in green technology by the Chinese government as well as industry. This will increase the reliability and reputation of Chinese wind technology globally.
中国呢严格了准入的条件，我觉着这对于我们发展是有好处的。这样呢，可以让我们这些有技术实力、有核心竞争力、产品质量过硬的大型企业大型产业集聚区得以发展，而防止一哄而上， 防止一些不具备生产条件的企业去介入新能源，最后造成新能源盲目发展，甚至是会造成发展新能源的同时，而在挥霍和浪费我们的能源。
China has shown continued efforts in developing a local industry and market for wind power. Technological advancements, domestic production to lower costs, and the policy structure are all required for a stable and thriving market. The recently passed renewable energy law will help, but further efforts to create the Chinese wind power industry need to be continued to push for greater regulations and higher standards. Local turbine companies now hold 80% of the Chinese market, which less than a decade ago was dominated by global wind companies such as Vestas, GE, and Spain's Gamesa. China now has more than 80 complete set manufacturers, 50 turbine blade manufacturers, 20 generator manufacturers, more than 10 converter manufacturers, and nearly 100 turbine tower manufacturers. Some domestic products, especially generator components, have entered the international marketplace, and it is estimated that China will become the world's leading wind power equipment manufacturer by 2015.
State governments now providing capital and to selected turbine manufacturers that have proven that their technology is viable and sustainable and meets international standards, to give them the capital and the financial support to allow them to export and compete in the world. Chinese turbines are at least 20% below the prices of international turbines that are built on a euro-based dollar in Europe and elsewhere.
Chinese wind industry manufacturers have already established international sales teams and are actively bidding for contracts overseas. The process is now underway to not only supply the national wind market, but to look for other international opportunities. China's biggest wind turbine manufacturer and the world's number 3, Sinovel, exported 10 wind turbines of 1.5 megawatts each to India last year. I'm at a large wind farm in Inner Mongolia in Shifun. There are wind farms developing all throughout this nation, north, west, southeast, on the mountains, in the grasslands, and even offshore. The annual growth rate for wind in China has been over 100% since 2005. And the wind goal for 2020 is to have 150 gigawatt generating capacity. That's the equivalent of over 300 standard coal-fired plants. Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region is an important energy base in North China and ranks top on the list in the nation's capacity of installed wind power. The area's rich in wind power resources are mainly concentrated in 2 areas: northern China's grasslands and Gobi Desert, as well as the east coast from Shandong and Liaoning, stretching down to southeastern China. China is the biggest wind power market in the world, already doubling its installed wind capacity. Inner Mongolia's wind power amounts to 20% of its coal-fired thermal power, compared with 2% at a national level. The region's estimated total wind power potential amounts to 150 gigawatts, which is almost half of China's onshore wind power potential. I'm here in rural Inner Mongolia where they've been utilizing wind power since the 1980s. Behind me are the Mongols. This is a traditional form of Mongolian housing. They've been using these turbines to power things like telephones, heating systems, and repower their cell phones.
Wind energy has been utilized in China since the Shang dynasty, almost 3,000 years ago, to power sailboats. After the Ming dynasty, windmills were broadly used. In recent history, China began using wind power like we are familiar with today for remote areas like Inner Mongolia through independent small wind generators. This practice continues to be used effectively through these distant regions. I've been invited to an extremely remote Mongol to see just how wind energy is used in the most simplistic, nomadic, off-grid way.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for welcoming me into your Mongol Bao. I feel very honored to be here in your home, and I've never seen a home like this before. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions about your life and how you live here. So I was wondering, how many Mongol Baos does your family have altogether?
以前呢有他们家呢是2个蒙古包，还有大的棚。今年呢就是干旱，这个一部分生育呢也在东营盘就是没来了，哎，所以说就用了一个蒙古包。
So I notice you have your own personal turbine outside. Now, could you tell me, I've never been in a Mongol Bao, how that wind turbine works with inside this, what kind of energy it gives you and provides you?
너 재산 갈사로 대편은 단 대충은 또 더더는 더 변화 알바르 템바스나 저거도 더 자연님 수디아도 복디 잡지 대화네 대시네 수진 저 대충 그네 더는 어디 복디 세저죠
就是呢，现在就是这个风力呢，就是主要是生活上，它就提供了方便。原来是电那个小拉，那个就是特别不方便，也光线这块也不行。这么的话，风力来了以后呢，这个对牧民的生活呢，也是带来了一定的光明。
Life can be difficult in this northern region of China. There has been a drought this year that has lasted for months, and which has left the family with only 100 sheep, 200 horses, and 30 cattle. They had many more animals before, but there's not enough grass to feed them. They're usually very self-reliant, but luckily the Chinese government has offered assistance in purchasing these independent turbines because this remote region is off the national grid. This subsidy helps to create a normal life and offers some simple comforts such as lighting, watching TV, and powering of cell phones. In this region, there are both large in-grid wind farms coexisting alongside of the nomadic people and their transportable tiny off-grid technology. Although the scale difference is incredibly massive, the results are fundamentally the same: the creation of clean energy for the end consumer.
In an incredible short span of time, China's become a leader in the development and the commercialization of low-carbon technology. I'm here today to see a wind turbine installed and find out how this technology works. This is a perfect example of how China is going to accomplish its goal of 15% of its primary power driven from renewable energy. I'm here visiting a wind farm in Inner Mongolia, which is in the process of installing more wind turbines. This area is incredibly remote, and it took off-road vehicles to get us here. All of the workers actually live on site due to the distance from any major city. This particular wind farm is 42 square kilometers and generates 49 megawatts of power. It has 33 turbines installed, and each turbine creates 1.5 megawatts of power. A typical wind turbine consists of a 65-meter tall tower, a rotor blade the length of a Boeing 737, and a nacelle holding generator which houses the operating components and is approximately the size of a small motorhome. Turbines account for 70% of wind power project costs and sell at about 5 million RMB a megawatt in China. By the end of 2009, there were almost 80 wind turbine manufacturers, 30 of which had actually already sold wind turbines.
风机现在目前是国内设计最先进、最一流的风机，是目前唯一通过国家现场低电压穿越的机组。我们公司独立生产和制造的1.5兆瓦86米直径的机组，在全国以投运同类型机组中属于叶片直径最大、发电效率最高，风机的抗结冰能力和防雷电能力也是世界一流的。
The average installation of a wind turbine takes 1.5 days, so wind farms like this one take less than 2 months to create.
我们这个企业去年的话，已经吊装了580台的风机，占有国内的新装容量的5.6%。那么今年我们的计划是1500台，1500台的话，按照每台机组每年的利用率2500小时去测算的话，我们可以节省就可以减排二氧化碳，应该是在450万吨左右。
The Chinese government has been very successful in fostering a domestic turbine manufacturing industry through a variety of measures, including a local content requirement, by sharing the burden of the extra costs related to wind power across all of the provinces, and by setting a mandatory renewable energy market share for all the big utilities. All of these factors have driven the wind market to develop rapidly and to stimulate the wind manufacturing business. In January 2009, a change in the tax rules for wind manufacturing made it even more attractive for local governments to bring wind turbine manufacturing to their provinces, thereby even further stimulating the growth in the manufacturing capacity. Every day in China, wind turbines are being installed, faster than anywhere else in the world.
The state government and the Chinese Renewable Energy Association and NDRC clearly are all supporting programs and incentives for turbine manufacturing and development of wind in China, telling the state-owned utilities that they must have a certain percentage of their power capacity generation in renewable by the end of 2010 as the first annex date. And so a lot of that funding has now been allocated to drive the development of wind. So for sure, wind is by far the largest renewable now in China.
China's abundant inland and offshore wind energy resources are providing potential for large-capacity in-grid wind farms. Today, wind power in China is developing rapidly, and receives particularly strong government support. The potential benefits of national wind plants can reduce this country's dependence on coal as well as foreign trade. Because wind power can be created in China and is highly sustainable, it is one way of encouraging independence from unstable foreign markets and can keep helping to fuel China's rapid development.
The size and scope of wind energy here in China is truly on a massive scale. From the inner plains of Mongolia to the South China Seas, wind has swept this country. China is not only a world leader when it comes to wind energy power technology, but is also a major global supplier. And as we've seen on this show, wind is a resource of virtually limitless potential.